We got stuck.
Yep.
That's great. That's why we came here, right? Cool. All right. So what we're trying to do is my vehicle over here, trying to get around this tree, got stuck in this nice sugary snow, slid me down into some deep snow into that tree so I can't get out. So we're going to do a real simple redirect winch pull. All right. So yeah, my name's Eric Ross. I run a company called Sierra Mechanica. I teach off-road driving, navigation, preparedness, and recovery skills.
Yep.
I've been doing the formal version of this for about 2 years. I've been informally teaching people how to do recovery and driving for 8 to 15 years, depending on how you do the math. We've run it up here to a tree so we can walk up the line here. And as we're doing this, I'm looking at the line to see if I'm going to be dragging it on anything, if I see any damage to the line, anything I need to be concerned about. When we get up to the tree strap that we have on the tree here, we've got it down as low on the tree as we can. We try to have the 2 legs of the tree strap both equally loaded. You don't want to have one slack and one tight because that'll shift in the middle of the recovery and that can induce a shock load, so we don't like that. We're using a screw pin bow shackle. We've got the eyes of the tree strap overlapped in the bow of the shackle, and we've got the pin oriented up, so we've got the pin on the top. We'll talk about that more later perhaps. And we've got the pulley block aligned horizontally so we don't have any funky angles that when we put it under load are going to want to pull the line out of the sheave. All right. Because of where we're going, there's this rock really conveniently in the way, right? And we don't really like to drag lines over it. You guys have a line protector on here, so we could use that. The only thing I don't like about them, especially going over rocks, is you usually end up with the line going over one really sharp point on that rock and dragging on it. And even inside this line protector, you're going to damage it a little bit. So traction boards are great. Most of them, you can run the line directly up one of these little runnels here, and you can see this one's bent over on the rock. It'll hold it in place, and then the line is distributed along the length of it. So you're reducing that friction also. Down at the end here, we've attached to a frame-mounted recovery point on my vehicle. It's actually a rated recovery point. And we're using another screw pin bow shackle. One thing we want to be careful with bow shackles is we want to make sure that whatever we have loading the pin isn't so fat that it's actually going to stretch the bow shackle off the pin, okay? This looks like it's a little bit too fat, but the line inside is not nearly as broad as the sheave that's around it. So it's actually sitting in there pretty well. Not too worried about that expansion. I've also got it oriented so that I'm not side loading the shackle. If I had the pin in here instead of the way I have it now, you might be side loading the shackle, whereas here it can rotate like it needs to. We also have it on the high side of the vehicle so that as we're pulling, if we're pulling down on the low side, you might have the tendency to actually pull the vehicle up like this. You could actually induce a little bit of a roll. If we keep it over here, this is actually going to keep the vehicle cinched down, compress the suspension, and keep it nice and stable as we pull it out.
Gotcha.
Okay, cool. So safety for us, synthetic lines. We've got some synthetic rope here. We generally want anybody who's in this system while we're doing the recovery to be at least 2 vehicle widths off the line, wherever this is. Synthetic line's great. It tends to break in a linear, sort of predictable fashion, but it's still dynamic. It doesn't just drop to the ground, and it will take stuff with it.
It was starting to come up. If that tree wasn't there, I think we might have been all right.
Yeah, if the tree wasn't there, it was good. Don't want to tear my light off. That's okay. This will be a good opportunity. We'll talk about traction boards because we can throw some down and see if we can drive off on them.
Okay.
All right, we got foiled by a tree.
Yeah.
All right, so we were pulling a little bit back instead of up. Part of that's the sugary snow, so we don't have a lot of traction for the wheels to help us, so we just kind of crab walked in place. We could probably re-rig the winch. We could either, anchor someplace further forward on the vehicle to pull it more sideways. Variety of things we could do there, but in the process of doing this, we actually created a couple of channels we could probably drive out of. So we're going to practice with traction boards and see how that works and talk about the slight differences between these. So we've got 3 different kinds out here right now. We've got your traditional Max Tracks, an orange, and you get your brown ones over here. Those brown, tan, coyote, I can't remember what they're calling those these days. And we also have some Action Tracks, which is a variation on that theme. And I don't remember who makes these. I got them off Amazon. They cost about 40 bucks a pair, all right? So what do I do and don't like about them? What I do like about Max Tracks is they've been around for a long time. They're a bit of an industry standard. They sort of set the bar. They're a pretty good compromise thing. They're good in sand. They're good for bridging. You can lay them on top of each other to hold a little more weight. They're a little bit more rigid, so if you're going across gullies and stuff like that or trying to ramp up a steep ledge, they're really good for that. One thing I ran into with them, along with anything that doesn't have a little extra traction on them, is that tires tend to spin on them, right? And it's a little hard to get them underneath the tires so you've got immediate traction to drive on. And in particular, that's a problem in the winter. Everything gets a little more rigid in the wintertime, and it's really hard to get these to get underneath the tire so you've got that instant traction. So Action Tracks is a derivative of these, and they're a little bit more flexible. So you can just kind of see just from me wobbling around here, it's a little bit easier to get these to conform under a tire because I can literally bend it under the tire, right? I was really skeptical about putting these bolts on here, teeth as we're called, because I was concerned I was going to have the same experience I had with the Max Tracks where a wheel would spin, but now I'm destroying a tire, which would be worse, right? So that has not been my experience. As long as these get seated properly under the tire, you get immediate traction, which is fantastic. So between the flexibility and that immediate traction, these are better for me in the wintertime here than the Max Tracks are. Another thing I run into is that these are pretty long, which is great when you've got a vehicle that has clearance, where I've got enough room between the rocker panel and the ground to actually get this underneath the tire. But a lot of the recoveries that we end up doing are on vehicles that are crossovers, Subarus. They're not lifted that much. I cannot get this underneath the rocker panel and underneath the tire without doing a whole lot of digging. And a lot of times you don't want to dig because the idea is you want to get it back up onto whatever it was. You don't want to dig another trench, right? So the smaller ones are good for that. They're also far less expensive. Okay. I've never had these break on me. I have shattered a set of these. You can see one of these has a little crack in it. We did a really heavy recovery one day. It's actually a plow truck. And I had all three of these, not this set because this is new, because these had to get replaced because they shattered.
Wow.
It was 0 degrees. It was really bitterly cold. It was a heavy truck. It was on a really hard surface because it was just ice. And between all those factors, I still have the old ones and the bits and pieces that came off of it. But these didn't shatter and those just cracked. So when you're talking about relative benefit in terms of cost, if you need some traction boards, go buy 2 sets of those. You got 4 of them. You can stick them under each tire. They're easy to get under there. You spent $80, you have something to work with. So let's go ahead and build a road.
Still on the boards. I think you're good. There you go. Perfect. We're out of it.
All right. So we could have done that just from the get-go, right? So we had a little fun playing with the winch, but if we didn't have one, we have traction boards, we have a shovel, we could have shoveled all that snow out, created those channels that we had, throw some traction boards down. I would have been a little bit leery because I was already into this tree a little bit. But worst case, have somebody kind of move it out of the way if we need to. What would be the sensible thing for us to do now? What's likely to happen with you guys?
The same thing, to slide down this way, right?
So why wouldn't we just build a road? We've already got them out here, right? We can literally just line them up just on this side right here to keep you from slipping off. Just take all these, line them up, everybody drives over them when we're clear. Gotta love that crunchy sound.
That was perfect.
No. Excellent, nice job. So one of the questions we get all the time, right, is what should I get? What should I have in my vehicle? What should I start with? And the really short answer to that is that you need to get the gear that's appropriate for what you're doing and for your vehicle. The gear that's appropriate for a two-door Jeep TJ is not going to be the same for a 14,000-pound Power Wagon. And if you have a winch or you don't, and depends on what you're doing with it. If you're doing mild overlanding, you probably don't need a huge amount of gear, but if you're going way in the outback, maybe you do. If you're doing rock crawling, whole different thing. So, but that said, there's some basics that I think everybody could and should think about starting with. As we just saw up here, playing in the snow, you can get a long way with some traction and moving snow. So number one on the list is a good pair of gloves. When you're doing recovery work with gloves, I recommend you get ones that don't have the straps on them. That's a safety item, so that if your glove gets snagged on some piece of recovery gear, it's taking the glove instead of degloving your hand, okay? Especially in the wintertime, I carry like 4 or 5 pairs of these, and as they get wet, I put them up on the dash, they dry out, I put on another pair. And of course, I've got some winter gloves too, but if you're out here being active, like right now, I'm kind of hot. Yeah. So we're all warm from running around in the snow. So a good pair of gloves. This is the kind of shovel that I recommend if you're gonna just get one shovel. This is like a 32-inch, 34, 36, depending on where you buy it. It's a spade with the D handle. This is just the right size to like get down and like dig out a tire, but I could also reach in and clear out an axle. A full-size shovel is kind of a pain to carry around, kind of ungainly. I also have these avalanche shovels. They're great if it's just snow, but as soon as I start hitting any dirt or rock, these are pretty useless. This is kind of nice because it's got an adjuster on it so I can dig a little further if I want to. But this is really for avalanche rescue, not for recovery. That said, I've got 4 shovels in the back of my truck. But I usually just have, if I'm gonna go with anything, I'll take these 2, because then I can be like, hey, Twan, division of labor, man, let's dig out this truck, right? So friends with shovels are great. So if I was going to recommend anything, we already talked a little bit about traction boards and their relative benefits. A version of those, whether it's 2 or 4, is kind of up to you. 4 is always better, but space limitations, weight limitations, budget limitations, totally get it. So right here is kind of the starter pack, okay? From there, you move up to, okay, well, if I am going to have any kind of recovery gear, right at the top of the list is what am I going to attach it to on the vehicle and how am I going to attach it? So that's where we talk about connectors and anchor points. So most 4-wheel drive vehicles are going to have a tow bar on them. They're kind of standard these days. Or they're going to come with tie downs that may or may not be adequate for recovery points also. It's kind of a longer discussion. So just be aware of what you can and can't attach to on your vehicle. A lot of time those tie downs are really just designed to hold your vehicle on a flatbed. They're not designed for any kind of dynamic pull, right? So I've got some rated recovery points that are mounted to the frame. I've got the tow bar on mine, so it's a rated receiver. Keep in mind those receivers they're designed for towing static loads. So they're pretty good for doing like a kinetic pull, but they're not really designed for really heavy dynamic stuff. You got to be careful about that. And similarly, I have something on the front. Whenever I teach a driving class or teach a recovery class and we're going out in the field, I require everybody who's on that trip, or if I'm guiding a trail, they've got to have at least one recovery point on the front and the rear. And it's something that's mounted to the frame, so if we need to yank them out or winch them, we've got something to attach to, okay? So when we're talking about what we're gonna attach with, we're generally talking about soft shackles and hard shackles. So with soft shackles, a couple of key things. Number one, make sure that you're buying these from a reputable company. And ideally, you're getting somebody who cares enough to actually have a tag on here that tells you where it's made, who made it, what it's made out of, and has the actual load ratings on it, what its working load limit or its maximum tensile strength or its minimum braking strength is, okay? If somebody hands you a soft shackle, you just handed me one a minute ago, right? As a max traction, you said, this is 10,000 pounds. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I know that? It is from a reputable company, so that's good, right? But I still don't know. So whenever somebody hands me a piece of gear, that's what I'm looking for here. So with both of these newer shackles I have, they've got those tags on them. This is one that I got like 15 years ago, and it just had this wrapping tag on here, so it's not quite as good, but at least it has a rating on it. So I have some confidence that the company actually cared enough to tell me, what this was rated for, right? And when you get these, you want to make sure that they're rated appropriately for your vehicle. This is a 3/8 inch shackle. This is a 7/16. This one obviously has a higher rating. And also what you're going to be attaching to, and make sure that it'll actually loop through the gear that you have. I also recommend that you get longer rather than shorter shackles. I've got one that's about half this length and I never use it. It basically is a shackle that holds all my other shackles together. Especially when it gets cold, you're trying to loop around stuff. It may seem convenient because they're small and they fit in a small space, but when it comes to doing recovery work, they're not that great. Okay, so longer's better. I actually have an extra long one that I also have for various reasons. So soft shackles are great. I'm not going to go into proper rigging, that's for a different class. But make sure you're getting good gear from a reputable company that's properly rated for your stuff. The one downside to soft shackles is that they are susceptible to things like cutting, and you can't put them on hard edges, right? So you can see that I've got these recovery points on my vehicle and they've got really hard edges on them. If I were to put a soft shackle on there, it'll just cut it. Okay, so it's not appropriate. So a lot of vehicles, you're gonna need to have a hard shackle to mount to those points. Same with the front of your vehicle there. In theory, you could put a soft shackle on that, but you'll probably crush it. Maybe not cut it, but crush it, and then you've got a damaged soft shackle or it will break. So you're gonna need a hard shackle. This is not in fact called a D-ring. I know everybody calls them D-rings. When you buy them off the shelf at four-wheel drive shops, they call them D-rings. This is a screw pin bow shackle. Okay, this is a screw pin and this is a bow. All right, a D-ring literally is a D and it's for using chain. Okay, I make that distinction because if you're going to buy a screw pin bow shackle, I highly recommend you get it from an overhead lifting company. The stuff that you can get in a four-wheel drive shop might have all of the markings on here that make it sound like it's legit, but it is not actually inspected and tested like overhead lifting gear is for the industry. And as a result, you're never really quite sure what you're getting. Whatever you do, don't buy it off Amazon. You can get these for 12 bucks. I guarantee you for 12 bucks, those are stamped in a factory. They're cast, which means they're just melting down whatever metal they have. When those break, they literally shatter, all right? These are drop forged, which means that they're ductile, which means when you start to exceed its limit, it stretches. And it'll stretch almost twice its size before it'll break. Okay, so get good gear. You know, it's gonna cost you 35 bucks. These are gonna cost you 35 or 50 bucks anyway, so go ahead and invest. Crosby and Van Beest are the two companies that I recommend. So if you wanna know where those are, we can talk about that later. So those are the two things you're gonna wanna attach with. I recommend you have 2 soft shackles and 2 of these that give you some versatility for attaching to a variety of things, okay? So when it comes to how you might attach to the vehicle, if you just have a tow bar with a 2-inch or a 2.5-inch receiver, you wanna have a receiver shackle of some kind. This one's a fancy aluminum one, costs about 100 bucks. I think you've got one that's similar sitting over there. The one thing I like about this is that it's got rounded edges on here so I can put a soft shackle on it, or it's set up so I can put a screw pin bow shackle on it also. So I've got a little versatility there. I also recommend that you get them so they're cross drilled so you can orient it different ways. Usually they're gonna come so that when it's sitting on the bumper, it's sitting like so. When I'm going around corners towing somebody, I don't wanna be side loading this. So I'm gonna turn it 90 degrees so I've got some articulation. So those cross drills are really handy. And if they're at different depths, different tow bars and where the pins go, gives you a little bit of versatility too. Yeah. Also keep in mind that the pins, the actual hitch pins, are not rated typically. You can get rated ones. You know, these are good for towing. If you're going to be doing dynamic pulls like with a kinetic rope, you might want to get a rated one. If you want to get rated pins, you go to Tractor Supply and you don't go to the towing section, you go to the tractor section. And in there they'll have colored T-bar handles, and those will indicate what they're rated for. The typical 5/8 pin I think is rated for 10,000 pounds. And the colors indicate their rating and the diameter of the pin. So a couple of clues there. You can just get the regular steel ones, like Kurt makes a good one. It comes with the screw pin bow shackle on it. I don't have a lot of confidence that the screw pin bow shackle is rated, but if you're not planning on doing any really heavy pulls on it, I've used one for a long time, so probably okay. All right, so we've got dig out, traction, how to attach to stuff. Moving on from there, probably kinetic rope is going to be the next thing that people are going to find the most useful. Yeah, go ahead and hand that to me if you don't mind. So kinetic ropes are the devil you know and the devil you love and the devil you hate, okay? These are really versatile. It's kind of funny, I wanted to talk to you about why we didn't use a kinetic rope on that recovery. Yeah. And it was because of, you know, how much the vehicle was already sliding. If we had tried pulling just straight forward or backwards, we would have just crab walked it into trees, right? So that didn't make a lot of sense. And with these, you know, a lot of times you're wanting to do a dynamic pull. Well, if you do a dynamic pull there, you're just yanking yourself into a worse situation, so not appropriate. So with these, a few things. Number one, same as we were talking about with soft shackles, get one that's got a tag on it that tells you what it's rated for from a reputable company. You can get these on Amazon and they'll be green and they'll tell you that it's rated for 22,000 pounds. I don't know where it was made, what it's made out of. It looks good, but I'm not going to trust it. Okay. So, you know, Bubba Rope, this is from ASR Off-Road, Safe Extract. There's a bunch of companies that have been making these for a while and they'll tell you what they're rated for. Number two, make sure that they're rated appropriately. A huge misconception is that bigger is better, okay? Bigger usually means I'm getting a bigger winch line, which means it can hold a higher load. Well, these are intended to stretch, right? They're intended to stretch up to about 30% of their length. Well, you can't stretch it if you aren't able to create enough momentum or energy with the vehicle that's actually pulling it, all right? So the load rating for these is usually 3 to 4 times the gross vehicle weight rating of the vehicle that's doing the pulling, not the one that's stuck. Because that vehicle is going to create the momentum that'll actually stretch this out, all right? You're never going to find the exact number, right? And every company is going to be a little different. This is a 7/8. It's rated to 28,000 pounds, which is a little bit heavy for my truck, but my truck's also loaded pretty heavy, so it's pretty close. I've also got a 3/4 inch in there if I'm not stretching it. Length, they're usually in 20 or 30 foot lengths. I appreciate longer because ideally you're going to want to have the vehicle that's pulling on traction. So if you need to go further to get on traction, that's actually good. 20 foot is good if you're like towing somebody through windy roads. So there's a compromise there. If you're going to use this, I'm not going to go into the class on how to use a kinetic rope. I'm just going to tell you this. Don't go faster than 5 miles an hour. Simple as that. Start off just trying to do a static pull. The most you're going to do is back up about half the length of whatever rope you have and go 5 miles an hour. If that vehicle doesn't come out, you need to reduce the resistance or go to another plan. Okay? If you go faster than that, this literally can't stretch fast enough. It actually has a rate of elongation and it turns into a static rope, and that's when you start breaking stuff. Okay, cool. All right, so moving on, other things that are going to be helpful. Go ahead and hand me that round sling here. This has become sort of my new best friend because it is really versatile. I can use it as an extension. I can use it for bridling. I can use it in a pinch. I could use it as a tree strap, but I'm going to tell you not to because it doesn't actually distribute the load like a tree strap really is supposed to. But they're really versatile and they're not expensive. This is like a 12-foot one, and it is rated for a vertical pull for 10,600 pounds. So that's rated to my winch if I just do a straight line pull. And I think I paid $90 for it. So for a piece of recovery gear that's pretty versatile, these round slings are really handy. However, make sure that in the same way that you're getting a screw pin bow shackle from an overhead lifting company, same thing with these. Make sure you're getting it from one of them or a tow company. That's where you're going to see it mostly. Okay, the last three that are going to seem a little bit counterintuitive are going to be a winch line extension, a tree strap, and a pulley block, even if you don't have a winch. All right? The reason I recommend that is that I can still, the way I was off the trail here, right? We had a winch to pull. Well, if we didn't have the winch, we still could have used all this exact same gear. We would have turned your vehicle around, rigged it to the back of your vehicle, and just had you drive, right? Your vehicle's the winch, all right? You can do that with any vehicle, pretty much, as long as you have a way to attach it. So even if you don't have a winch, you can still do that redirect to get a vehicle back on a trail. So that's what the tree strap and the pulley block and the winch line extension are for. Similarly, what I hear all the time is people have a winch, they think they're good to go. They go out in the boondocks, they have their winch, they've got a hook on the front, they don't have a way to attach to a tree, they don't have a way to attach to a vehicle. If you don't have a winch, but you have this gear and you come along and you say I have a winch, and I'm like, okay, cool, let's hook me up. And you're like, well, I don't have anything else. I'm like, okay, I got us covered, right? So you can hook up that stuff. Yeah. And similarly, a pulley block, you know, when we get into doing heavy pulls, you can do a double line pull so you can reduce the load on the winch and all that kind of stuff too. So how much is it going to cost? About $400 or $500, all said and done. If you're buying quality gear, you know, the saying amongst all my trainer buddies is buy once, cry once. buy good gear right off the bat. It'll last you a long time. I've had this soft shackle for 15 years. I've used it, I'm gonna go with dozens, maybe 100 times. And you know, I inspect my gear and you can tell it's getting a little bit worn, and at some point it'll just be a demo piece, right? But if you get quality gear and you use it properly, it'll last a long time.
So that was a ton of information and a lot of gear that we covered, but there is so much more that I think if you wanted to, you can definitely reach out to Eric. I'm gonna have his contact info down in the description so that way you can reach him. But Eric, can you tell us a little about, you know, how you got started and everything, just some more information on you?
Yeah, you bet. So first of all, thanks for inviting me out. I really appreciate it. I'm one of those rare Colorado natives, so I've been in the backcountry since I was a wee kid. And that started with, you know, doing backpacking and hiking and doing land nav with a compass with my dad. That turned into mountain biking at some point. And then in the early 90s, I bought my first 4Runner, and like that was the first big mistake, right? So I've had a whole bunch of 4Runners, built an FJ Cruiser, drove it for about 15 years. I got this beautiful rig a few years ago, and yeah, so I help with the Rocky Mountain Toyota Roundup. So it's an event we do over on the Western Slope every year. That's actually coming up in July. We're doing our third one.
Yep, and we'll be there too.
And you'll be there too. That's right. Fantastic. You're one of our sponsors. I have been a volunteer with Colorado 4x4 Rescue and Recovery for the last 8 years or so. I've had the benefit of being on about 250 recoveries during that time, and everything from what we did today to much more complicated to much more simple things. Yep. I'm one of the driving trainers for that, and I help with some of the other recovery training. My regular gig is doing cartography and GIS. If you're interested in that, that's some nerdy stuff. But yeah, if you have any questions, you're gonna have contact info for me. I've got a website, sierramechanica.com. I'm on Facebook. Get a hold of me any way you want to. You can email me, message me on Messenger, call me. I've got a couple of classes coming up in the spring. We'll have some more over the summer doing driving, recovery, all that kind of stuff. And hopefully we'll see you out there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric.
Yeah, you betcha. Fantastic.
Thanks much, guys. If you guys are new here, subscribe to the channel. Let us know what you guys want to see. And again, Eric, that was amazing. I learned a lot. So I know a little bit as the years that we've kind of been doing this, but just that alone, within the hour or two we were out here, I learned so much more. So hit Eric up, and we'll see you guys in another video.
Get training.